On this Monday night, dissecting the carbon tax hike, the chorus of criticism, the hundreds of economists who say it's the least expensive way to reduce emissions, and the rising rebates coming to Canadians. The federal government serves up a new national school lunch program.
When you're hungry, it's really, really hard to learn.
When it will launch and how many students it will feed. Gaza's largest hospital left in ruins after another Israeli raid, what one patient says he and staff endured. And it wasn't always a slam dunk.
People have doubted me, people look past me.
The high hopes this young Canadian can catapult his U.S. college basketball team to the top.
Global National with Donna Friesen.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. There's lots of sound and fury this April 1st about the rise in the federal price on carbon. Burning fossil fuels will cost people in most provinces a bit more, and they'll get more in rebates. The federal carbon tax applies everywhere except Quebec, BC, and the Northwest Territories, which have their own programs. It's going up 23%. That will add about 3 cents a litre to the cost of gas. And the amount Canadians get back every 3 months is rising too. The next check or direct deposit will be April 15th. It varies by province. A family of 4 in Alberta will get about $1,800 a year back. A family in New Brunswick will get $760 a year. Most households will get a larger rebate than they pay in carbon tax. The intent is to create a financial incentive for people to pollute less. Yet critics frame it as an affordability issue, and that's where politics comes in. Our chief political correspondent David Akin has our top story tonight. David.
Well, Donna, last week, 400 economists, experts all of them, signed an open letter supporting the federal carbon pricing approach.
Carbon pricing is the lowest cost way to reduce emissions.
And the independent parliamentary budget officer says that for most Canadians, the rebates will be bigger than the tax paid.
We estimate 80% of households get more than what they pay.
Though the carbon tax may slow household income growth.
Income growth that will be lower than it would otherwise have been.
But the country's conservative leaders, Scott Moe, Danielle Smith, Blaine Higgs, and most of all, Pierre Poilievre, don't much care what experts and economists say.
Look behind you there. That right there is Justin Trudeau and the NDP's cruel April Fool's Day joke on Canadians.
It's no joke. On April...
The Conservatives have been running an Axe the Tax drive for weeks. TV ads, social media campaigns, leaders' rallies across the country. Last week, several Conservative MPs even led protests at the local constituency offices of some of their NDP and Liberal opponents.
We've called on my good friend Mark Serre, who's a good guy, but he doesn't seem to get the message that we need a break. Canadians need a break.
But the more surprising opposition is now coming from Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's ideological allies, leaders of provincial Liberal parties, opposed to the program of their federal cousins.
We will make polluters pay, but we won't add additional tax burden to Ontarians.
Waiting 3 months for a rebate isn't realistic for a lot of New Brunswickers.
The country's only Liberal provincial premier, Newfoundland and Labrador's Andrew Furey, repeated his opposition to the tax Monday and called on Trudeau to convene an urgent First Minister's meeting on the matter. Asked about that, Trudeau appeared frustrated with the premiers.
But we're not seeing detailed plans from the premiers on this. They'd much rather try to complain about it and make political hay out of this.
And David's with me now. David, the point of the carbon tax is to change behavior. If people pay a little more for fossil fuels, maybe it will push them to find cleaner alternatives, and the rebate will help with that. Is part of the problem for the Liberals a failure to communicate effectively?
Oh, absolutely. And of course, that has opened the door for campaigns by Trudeau's opponents to whip up anti-government sentiment. We saw some small protests across the country today, but they have focused only on the tax and not on the rebate. And that certainly is the government's fault. Remember, that rebate was first buried as a credit in your tax return. They called it the Climate Action Incentive and has only just recently been rebranded as the Canada Carbon Rebate. And it's now paid directly to consumers 4 times a year. Donna.
Okay, David in Ottawa, thank you. For lots of Canadian families, paying for food is a constant concern. Today, the federal government promised a national school lunch program, something it talked about doing 3 years ago. Canada is the only G7 country without one. It will cost $1 billion over 5 years to provide about 400,000 kids a year with lunch. Research shows it could save those families about $189 per month per child. Mackenzie Gray explains what's planned.
Thank you. As a political issue, it's hard to be against the idea.
When you're hungry, it's really, really hard to learn.
The Liberals following through on a 2021 election promise 3 years later.
We'll be investing $1 billion to create a national school food program that'll provide meals to 400,000 more kids every year.
Cash sent to provinces to build up existing programs and establish new ones, with the target of more kids getting healthy food by the start of the next school year.
It's not an exaggeration to say that this will change the future of Canadian life and Canadian children's health.
That's Debbie Field from the Coalition for Healthy School Food. Her organization has been pushing for this plan for decades.
The affordability food crisis has really hit the school food programs, and they can't afford the healthy food they want to serve. So they're often going down in terms of serving sizes, or serving less food, or not serving as many kids.
With only a third of Canadian schools offering free meals and food inflation pinching grocery budgets, growing the number of programs won't just lead to full stomachs. Studies show in Sweden, where there's a universal school food program, women labor participation increased by 5%. But the biggest beneficiary? Parental pocketbooks.
We know that a national school meal program with access to free breakfast and lunch at schools can save families upwards of $190 per child per month, and that really goes a long way right now.
Justin Trudeau's announcement, a part of a new strategy from the Liberals to pre-announce their upcoming federal budget, a trend that Liberal sources tell us, Donna, will continue for the next 2 weeks.
Mackenzie Gray in Ottawa. Thanks, Mackenzie. Iran has accused Israel of a deadly airstrike on the Syrian capital, Damascus. It destroyed an Iranian consulate building and killed at least 6 people. Syrian and Iranian state media say an Israeli warplane targeted the consular section of Iran's embassy in Damascus. Among the dead is a senior commander of Iran's Revolutionary Guard, a key figure in Iran's military hierarchy. Iran has vowed a decisive response of the same magnitude. Israel has not taken credit, but has struck targets in Lebanon and Syria before. What was Gaza's largest hospital is now mostly in ruins. Israeli forces had assaulted it again, this time for 2 weeks, and this time entire buildings were destroyed. The medical complex in northern Gaza is barely recognizable after days of intense fighting and Israeli airstrikes, the rubble strewn with bodies that have yet to be recovered. Crystal Gamansing reports on the scale of the destruction and what it means for Palestinians who are still alive.
Operating rooms, a radiology department, a dialysis unit. Virtually nothing resembling what was Gaza's largest medical complex remains. This is what the facility looked like 1 week ago when Israeli forces showed off what they claim were weapons found inside al-Shifa hospital. Israel has justified multiple raids on or near hospitals, saying Hamas and other Palestinian militants have been using health facilities in their operations.
I believe that the terrorist takeover of Shifa and the subsequent special forces operation to clear the hospital of terrorists will be studied by future generations of military strategists.
Under international law, hospitals are protected during times of war, but that designation can be lost if facilities are militarized. Israel claims more than 200 militants were killed during the operations and more than 500 Hamas or Islamic Jihad members were captured. The Hamas-run Gaza government media office says Israel killed more than 400 Palestinian civilians in and around the hospital. Destruction is far and wide in the Shifa compound, says this Palestinian medic. The World Health Organization said 21 patients were killed since the hospital was under siege. Survivors are now being moved to Al-Ali Baptist Hospital. The patient says the bombing was constant and they were left with small amounts of food for them and the remaining staff. Based on WHO statistics, out of 36 hospitals in Gaza, only 10 were left providing minimal services. And that was before the destruction of al-shifa. Crystal Gamansing, Global News, London.
Israel's parliament has approved a law that paves the way to ban foreign news networks it deems to be national security risks. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said he would act immediately to close Al Jazeera's operations in Israel. He accuses the Qatar-based network of being a Hamas mouthpiece. The channel has accused Israel of deliberately targeting its staff in Gaza. Journalists, including the son of the Al Jazeera Gaza bureau chief, have been killed in Israeli airstrikes. A big election defeat for Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, whose main opponent dominated local elections. Supporters of the Republican People's Party took to the streets in celebration last night after their candidates gained 9 mayoral seats nationwide. They swept most big cities, including Istanbul, where Mayor Ekrem İmamoğlu won by more than 1 million votes. He is widely considered to be Erdogan's potential rival in the next presidential election. The results mark Erdogan's biggest electoral defeat in more than 20 years. There's a new theory about what's behind a mysterious illness affecting diplomats, including Canadians, in Cuba. It's known as Havana syndrome. Now an investigation by journalists reveals the diplomats may have been targeted by Russian sonic weaponry, controlled by a top-secret unit within the Russian military. Joel Senek reports.
It's a mysterious ailment reported by diplomats and spies stationed at home and abroad.
Inside my right ear, it was like a dentist drilling on steroids.
This FBI agent speaking to CBS's 60 Minutes about Havana syndrome, named after American and Canadian diplomats in the Cuban capital reported suffering concussion-like symptoms in 2016. The condition itself is still under investigation, but now 60 Minutes, Latvia-based The Insider, and Germany's Der Spiegel are drawing connections between Russia and the potential attacks, citing evidence they say shows acoustic weapons testing was done by a top-secret Kremlin unit. They're linking the group to a reported Havana syndrome case in the country of Georgia.
I was frankly not very surprised.
Russia expert Simon Miles says the reporting follows a pattern of how the Kremlin operates in foreign countries. The same top-secret unit is linked to high-profile incidents, like the failed 2018 assassination of former Russian intelligence officer Sergei Skripal in the UK.
Bad actors like the Russian Federation are only emboldened when their activities are not called out and explicitly and meaningfully punished.
The Kremlin is dismissing the report, a spokesperson Monday calling it nothing more than unfounded accusations. U.S. officials also don't believe Russia is involved.
The intelligence community's broad assessment that a foreign adversary is unlikely to be responsible for these incidents.
Some Canadian diplomats who were based in Cuba are now suing the federal government. The Foreign Affairs Minister's office did not provide us a statement before our deadline, but the lawyer for the group hopes the new reporting leads to action.
I think Prime Minister Trudeau will step up and follow through on his commitment to my clients, especially as this becomes more clear as to what's happened.
Here in Washington, the Biden administration says they take reports of Havana syndrome seriously and will continue to closely examine the cases as they work to find a conclusion. Joel Senek, Global News, Washington.
A last-minute change to tax filings. Coming up, what the CRA's just done that Canadians need to know about. In case you need a reminder, it is tax season. Personal returns are due at the end of the month, and a last-minute change has accountants across the country fuming, and thousands of Canadians facing an unnecessary bill. It has to do with something called bare trusts. As Abigail Beeman explains, you may have one of them without even knowing it.
I walked out of my office and I let out a guttural scream of frustration.
Accountant Chris Dyke's reaction when he learned the Canada Revenue Agency cancelled new reporting requirements for bare trusts Thursday of a long weekend before a Tuesday deadline. Before your eyes glaze over, a bare trust could apply to you. It's when you have legal title to an asset, but you're not the beneficial owner. Examples include being on a joint bank account to help elderly parents, or being on title of a mortgage to help your kids. Until Thursday, Canadians in those situations newly had to report it.
there'll be a number of clients that want to adhere to the law and would have prematurely made sure they filed on time, and they've already done the work and they've already spent the money.
The CRA is expanding trust reporting requirements in general to try and crack down on tax evasion and fraud. But experts Global News consulted agree including bare trusts won't help.
I use the term soul crushing.
Most of these bare trust arrangements aren't where income is being generated, right? There wouldn't be any additional tax to pay.
The CRA tells Global News it listened to stakeholders expressing concerns and needing more clarification. Industry frustration is about the last-minute switch, something the government also did with the underused housing tax last year.
Getting the government to try to work with stakeholders like CPA Canada in advance of implementing the legislation so we can try to get it right to begin with.
Dyke estimates his firm spent as much as $45,000 on bare trust filings and has chosen to take the hit.
We're not going to charge the clients for these because just in good conscience.
Is there going to be compensation for people who have incurred those costs now all for nothing?
Global News asked that question of the CRA, the Finance Department, and the ministers responsible, as well as why the change was so last minute. No one offered any answers, nor any message for Canadians who already paid a lawyer or an accountant trying to do the right thing. Abigail Beeman, Global News, Ottawa.
Global News has learned Air Canada has awarded a Hong Kong-based company a major contract to perform maintenance on its wide-body jets, raising security concerns here at home. Hong Kong's closer ties with Beijing have some in Canada's intelligence community pushing for a pause in the deal. They say Chinese surveillance equipment could be installed in the long-haul jets. The maintenance company says it undergoes regular audits and approvals by regulatory authorities to ensure adherence to international standards. You can read more about that Air Canada maintenance contract on our website, globalnews.ca. Happy anniversary ahead. Nunavut reflects 25 years after becoming a Canadian territory. Nunavut is celebrating today. 25 years ago, on April 1st, 1999, Nunavut was established. The biggest change to this country's map since Newfoundland and Labrador joined Confederation. As Melissa Ridgen reports, it took decades for the dream of an Inuit homeland with a culturally appropriate government to become a reality.
Nunavut means our land in Inuktitut, the language of the Inuit who've called this land home for millennia. Canada's largest and northernmost territory covers more than 2 million square kilometers of land and water and is home to 37,000, mostly Inuit, who continue to live their traditional ways. But anyone who calls this land home for any amount of time and regardless of ethnicity is embraced as Nunavummiut, the people who live here.
It's a new era in people's lives, and I think I see a lot of inspiration and dedication going on in this territory.
Governor General Mary Simon is Inuk from the neighboring Nunavik area. She spent the day in Nunavut celebrating the 25th anniversary.
It took the dedication of many people, including John Amarolik, who I've had the pleasure of seeing today, and I gave him the Order of Canada in his home. Because he's a Canadian hero.
Amagulik was chair of the Nunavut Implementation Commission and helped forever change Canada.
It was the first time since Newfoundland joined Confederation that the Canadian map changed. And we as Inuit are so proud of this thing that happened in Canada, which I don't think anybody ever thought that it would happen.
This whole region is what Canada called the Northwest Territories until an Inuit land claim carved out the eastern portion, and in 1999, Nunavut became Canada's third official territory. The creation of Nunavut was one of the late Brian Mulroney's final acts as Prime Minister, signing the Nunavut Agreement in 1993 to pave the way for the territory's birth 6 years later.
It is a vision that we had, and he gave it to us, and we are forever grateful.
Premier PJ Akiaguk's office tells Global News every community today is marking the 25th anniversary, reflecting on all the work it took to get here. Melissa Ridgen, Global News, Winnipeg.
Canada's latest basketball star is hard to miss. Born and raised in Toronto, Zach Edey is in his senior year at Purdue University and stands 7 feet 4 inches tall. He is among the tallest players in U.S. college basketball history. Eric Sorensen explains how he's worked on his game and is taking it to new heights.
In his hands, a basketball looks like a child's ball. At 7 feet 4 inches, Zach Edey is dominating U.S. college men's basketball. Edey has led Purdue University to the Final Four for the first time in 44 years. His determination overcoming all doubters.
It's kind of been the story of my life. People have doubted me, people look past me, and can't do that anymore.
It's been a remarkable journey. Edey only started playing basketball in high school after trying out hockey and baseball.
This kid had a whole bunch of transferable skills from other sports. That was the first time I saw him, and instantly it was like, wow.
At Purdue, he blossomed. His mom remembered the time a youngster asked for his autograph. He hadn't even played for the team yet.
And we said, that kid just got a signature from a nobody.
Well, he's not a nobody anymore. In the U.S. College Basketball Championship, he has scored 30 points and 15 rebounds in all 4 games. Who else has done that? Wilt Chamberlain, Jerry West, Elvin Hayes, only among the greatest in the history of the game. So, Zach Edey should be a shoo-in for NBA stardom. It's not, as they say, a slam dunk. Edey's game looks like it's from a different era, a center playing close to the basket. Today's big men are nimble, can shoot from long distance, like Victor Wembanyama.
The game has changed now, and the big man is not used quite as much as he was before. But I think Zach is good enough to overcome sort of those different philosophies.
Those who've watched him say he's ready. Zach Edey thanked his coach, Matt Painter.
4 years ago, he took a chance on me when not a lot of coaches would.
So few wanted to take that chance. Now, in the Final Four next weekend, Edey hopes to give back to bring Purdue its first men's basketball championship in history. Eric Sorensen, Global News, Toronto.
And that is Global National for this Monday. I'm Donna Friesen. Tonight's Your Canada is the Canadian Museum for Human Rights in Winnipeg. We'd love to see Your Canada. Please email it to viewers@globalnational.com. And thanks for watching. Hope to see you here again tomorrow. Bye-bye.